Welcome, everybody. My name is Linda Lenzke, and I am the AODA Alcohol and Other Drug Addiction Advocate at the OutReach LGBTQ Community Center. Today, we're going to talk about substance use disorder and harm reduction. First, I'm going to kind of identify some of the metrics and where we stand now and some of the solutions to move forward. A little bit about me before I start. I identify using she or her. I also identify as a lesbian. And I've been in recovery from alcohol, substances, and behaviors that no longer serve me for over 35 years. I use my lived experience to support others who still struggle. I'm a certified peer specialist for Wisconsin, and I provide peer support by phone, virtually via Zoom, and in person at the OutReach Community Center. A little bit about OutReach before we start. I'm going to draw your attention to the right side of this slide and introduce you to Maggie, the rainbow dog, who is our unofficial mascot. Some of the services that OutReach provides our community here in Madison, Wisconsin is we have peer counseling. I'm the AODA Advocate. We have a transgender advocate. That position is going to be filled again shortly. And we have a senior 50+ advocate. We also offer a number of different social and support groups, and this is a very short list. All of our support groups can be found on the OutReach website. But some of those include our Madison Area Transgender Association. We hold AA meetings, which is now going to transition into a harm reduction format, plus LGBTQ Al-Anon, Gay, Gray, and Beyond for our seniors, and a senior spirituality group. We also have a speakers bureau, and we do a lot of cultural competency training. We meet with different groups, either in person or virtually. We have a lending library that's open to the public that they can check out books. We have over 4,000 titles in our library, plus the directory. In the past, we published a printed directory of LGBTQ+ friendly businesses and services within the community. Because of the pandemic and the many changes to businesses, we're now doing it online. So it's easier to update and less costly. OutReach recently expanded our offices. So we have additional suites. We have our main suite, which is for our programming staff and is open to the public, which has the library. We also have an administrative offices suite, and a large conference room, small conference room, and a kitchen that we use for events. And some of our meeting spaces are available to the public if you need a place to meet. So today we're going to talk about harm reduction and safer use strategies. So the current status of substance use and overdose. We are in the midst of a drug overdose crisis with a record number of drug overdose deaths since 2020. Fentanyl is present in illicit drugs other than just heroin and opioids. Harm reduction practices need to also be applied when using meth, marijuana, or any other kinds of drugs. In the past, 12-step programs like Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous required complete abstinence as a measure of recovery success. Now, harm reduction recognizes that any reduction in use and the addition of safe practices and peer support are valuable steps to recovery. Harm reduction saves lives. Promote never using alone, use fentanyl test strips, and don't mix drugs. So I'm going to share with you some national LGBTQ+ substance use stats. Unfortunately, these stats are a little outdated. These are from 2019 and have been collected by the Substance Use and Mental Health Administration. Unfortunately, as we're all aware, substance use and alcohol use has increased during the pandemic. But I'm going to go over some of the basic statistics for our LGBTQ+ community as a starting point. Among LGBT adults with substance use disorder, you can see the statistics that 1 in 2, or 51.6%, struggled with illicit drugs. 3 in 5, or 64.6%, struggle with alcohol use, and 1 in 6, or 16.2%, struggled with illicit drugs and alcohol. That totals at 18.3%, or 2.6 million people aged 18 or older had a substance use disorder issue. 12.9%, or 1.9 million people 18 or older had both a substance use disorder and a mental illness. Let's talk about mental illness for a bit. Among LGBT adults with a mental illness, 2 in 5, or 38.2%, had a serious mental illness. That means 47.4%, or 6.8 million people aged 18 or older had a mental illness. In 2019, 7.6 million adults had a mental illness and or substance use disorder, which was an increase of 20.5% over 2018 and composed of increases in both SUD or substance use disorder and mental illness. And that has increased even more as a result of the pandemic. One more set of chart here, and this really does represent how it does not reflect the current status. Again, this is from 2019, but you can see particularly in the age group of 26 or older that there already was an increase in alcohol use among adults. And in both 18 to 25 and 26 or older, but during 2020 and 2021, alcohol use has increased beyond what you're seeing here in this chart. Here's one other chart. Now this, I think these statistics are from 2017, so they are a little outdated, but let me just review because they do kind of show a benchmark of where we were before we are where we are today. So this is a conservative estimate that 4.5% of the US is LGBT. Many people believe that it's 1 in 10 people who identify on some spectrum of the LGBTQ plus spectrum. And of them, 1/3 experience a mental illness. That's 60% more than heterosexuals, and are 2 to 3 times more likely to have long-term psychological or emotional problems. And they regularly face prejudice, harassment, and discrimination, which causes serious issues within the LGBTQ population. And some of those serious issues, which we'll talk about in addition to substance use and alcohol use, is homelessness. That's nearly 15 million people. And just a couple of additional points. Transgender people attempt suicide 9 times more than the entire US population. LGBTQ adults are 56% more likly to develop an alcohol use disorder, and almost 3 times as likely to develop another substance use disorder. Now we're going to talk about specific statistics for Dane County. And I want to thank Public Health Madison and Dane County for the statistics from their annual report. This data was updated in 2020. So the number of people who die due to drug overdose continues to increase in Dane County. And you can see here by the chart for 2020, 138 people, or 25 per 100,000, have died from drug overdoses. Compared to other injury-related causes of death, the age-related drug overdose rate in 2020 was 4.2% the rate of motor vehicle deaths and 3.4 times the rate of firearm-involved deaths. I recently heard in a news report that for young people, and I think that's ages 18 to 24, that suicide related to overdose deaths and other mental health issues is the second leading cause of death among that age group. So overdose deaths by age. More than half of all people who died of a drug overdose from 2018 to 2020 were 25 to 44 years old. You can see below at the chart that that is the largest percentage of the population. That's 29% of those different age groups. The highest rate of drug overdose deaths are among people, as I said, ages 25 to 54. And these age groups have experienced sharper increases in drug overdose death compared to people 18 to 24 and 55 plus years. Overdose deaths by sex. Nearly 2 people who died of a drug overdose death in 2018 to 2020 were male, 64%. Men experienced higher rates of drug overdose deaths compared to women from 2018 to 2020. The age-adjusted drug overdose death rate was 1.7 times as high among males compared to females. Overdose deaths by race and ethnicity. This chart is a little deceiving because when you just glance at it, it looks like 78% of the people who died of overdose are white. But let's kind of clarify this for a moment because that is deceiving. The age-adjusted drug overdose rate among Black people was more than 3 times the rate among white people from 2018 to 2020. Black people have experienced sharp increases in drug overdose death rates in the past decades. Looking at the percentage of people by race and ethnicity gives us information about groups that make up the bigger share of overdose deaths. White people make up the biggest share of overdose deaths in Dane County, but has a large white population. Rates shown below take population size into account and help us compare the impact of overdose deaths between groups of people. Now we're going to talk about some possible strategies and solutions to reduce harm from substance use and alcohol use disorders. The first most important thing as a starting point is to address stigma and bias, expand culturally appropriate services, and trauma-informed judicial practices. Good Samaritan laws and alternative responses need to be changed so that people who want to help someone in an overdose situation are not at risk for any kind of criminal action against them. Substance use prevention. We need to address the childhood experiences, the adverse childhood experiences that actually impact not only youth substance use, but adults when that mental health and those experiences have not been addressed. And we need to create support for families, increase overdose education and Narcan distribution training, and support services too for family members. Traumatic loss, grief support training for providers, plus process traumatic loss within the treatment center. And a reminder, harm reduction saves lives. We encourage people who are continuing to use drugs or extreme amounts of alcohol to never use alone. That helps prevent an overdose death. Risk mitigation. Emergency medical services leave behind a program for people, and the emergency department has take-home programs for people who visit the ER, and naloxone boxes for people to have. And access to care. This is so important. Expand outside of traditional hours and integrate primary care and behavioral health services. So I'm excited to talk about the next thing, Progress Not Perfection, LGBTQ plus harm reduction recovery group. So why is OutReach launching a harm reduction meeting model for recovery from alcohol and substances? Unlike complete abstinence or zero tolerance models, harm reduction supports any behavior change from moderation to abstinence that reduces harm from problems caused by alcohol and substance use, plus reduces stigma. Harm reduction is no longer a minority movement and may soon be accepted as the mainstream practice. Individuals set their own goals, employ strategies, and access resources that meet people where they are. So let me tell you a little bit more about how you can access and become a member of our Progress Not Perfection LGBTQ plus harm reduction recovery group. OutReach is launching a new alcohol and substance use recovery group to replace our Wednesday 5:30 p.m. LGBTQ plus AA meeting, beginning Wednesday, October 5th. The recovery group, Progress Not Perfection, LGBTQ plus substance use harm reduction, will meet twice a month on the first and third Wednesday of the month at 5:30 p.m. It will be a hybrid meeting. People can attend in person at the OutReach LGBTQ plus Community Center at 2701 International Lane here in Madison, Wisconsin in Suite 104, or virtually via Zoom. Our LGBTQ plus community members and allies who still struggle with alcohol or substance use are encouraged to attend. You can contact me by phone at this number or email me for info and to receive the Zoom meeting link. So if you read Our Lives magazine in the September-October issue, which will soon be on the streets, you'll see this ad along with an article about harm reduction and some of the services and support in our community that you can access for help. So there is help available. And this is just a brief summary of some starting places where you can get some help. One is Public Health Madison and Dane County, and that has information and resources for safer drug use, overdose prevention, and Narcan training. You can also sign up to receive overdose spike alerts. So when you will learn when there are increases in overdose deaths in Madison. There's the Behavioral Resource Center in Dane County, a voluntary person and family-centered service to help Dane County residents access mental health and or substance use services, regardless of insurance status. For those who have lost a loved one, either to recovery issues, substance use issues, or mental health issues, GRASP is a healing community with understanding, compassion, and for those who lost someone they love through addiction and overdose. And Safe Communities of Madison and Dane County has a recovery coach helpline, 24/7 access to support from people in long-term recovery who serve as advocates, peers, and confidants for people using substances and those who are concerned about a loved one's substance use. So when you receive this, make sure that you keep these resources and references. The first is the OutReach LGBTQ plus Community Center. As I mentioned earlier, all of our support groups and services are listed on our website. And Public Health Madison of Dane County offers lots of information about safer drug use, Narcan, fentanyl strips. Safe Communities, I highly recommend visiting that website. One of the things that you'll find on their website is the Dane County Ending Deaths from Despair Task Force, a task force created by the Dane County Executive, Joe Parisi. and a series of webinars about recovery and issues around suicide and mental health. In November, I will be creating one on ramping up LGBTQ plus recovery supports for our community members. The Behavioral Health Resource Center, I can't stress how important that is. And then this month on September 28th, because this is September is Recovery Month, is a special screening of Tipping the Pain Scale. And if you visit the link here, you can reserve your tickets for the September 28th movie, which is at the Marcus Ultra Point Cinemas here in Madison, Wisconsin. So here again is the link, and I have not seen the film yet, but there will be 3 people from the recovery community who will be introducing the film. One is Charlie Daniel of the AAOC, or the African American Opioid Coalition. There also is Tom Farley of the Rosencrantz Addiction Recovery Center. And most of you are probably familiar with Tom Farley because he often talks about addiction as it related to the death of his brother, Chris Farley. And then I'll be there also introducing the film, representing Outreach as the AODA Advocate. Lastly, I just want to let everybody know that September is Recovery Month, and that we will periodically on Outreach's website, not just in September, but throughout the year, and on our Facebook presence and using social media, we'll be talking about recovery issues. And don't hesitate to reach out to me. One of my roles as the AODA advocate here at Outreach, as I said earlier, is to provide support for people by the phone, by facilitating a meeting that you can join, or come into our community center and we can meet in person. As a person who has lived experience in alcoholism, substance use, and mental health issues, I can share my experience in an effort to support you in your journey to recovery. Thank you so much for taking the time to look at this video today, and please share it with other networks and people that you know who may benefit from it. So thank you very much, and I'm wishing everyone that you have a wonderful and healthy 2023.